So welcome everybody to this Twinmotion webinar. I am joined by my colleague Geoff, who's one of our visualizations and Twinmotion specialists. I myself, Craig Schonborn, am a client success manager here at Symmetry. So I come from a BIM management background in design, looking at things like airports, high rises, really sort of large complex projects. That's my background, and what I help to do is support our clients on workflows, integration, and all sorts of specialist consulting needs. Geoff, if you wouldn't mind giving a quick introduction to yourself.
Yes, thank you, Craig. Yeah, I'm Geoff. Much of my work within our world is visualization. So I deal with the visualization of output, so rendering, real-time renders, supporting all clients all across the board, really. My background is that I was, once a long time ago, I was carpenter on site, but I then worked in the AEC industry and then moved towards CAD, AutoCAD, and then on to 3D Studio Max, to be honest. And then I worked in the gaming industry for many years, teaching and training 3D Studio Max and materials and texture for the gaming industry, which really brings us to Twinmotion's methodologies.
Nice, great, thank you. Well, we're going to dive in shortly, but while we're going through the webinar, if you've got any questions, please leave them in the chat and we'll look to address them in the end. So yeah, let's dive right into the discussion, Geoff. So could you just give a quick summary of where Twinmotion sits in the visualization space?
Yeah, excellent. Twinmotion really sits in all aspects of the visualization space, from an initial design concept to full broadcast quality 3D visuals. Twinmotion is very quick to work with, and it instantly renders visuals and of course has the backing of Unreal Engine. So if you're familiar with the great developments in the gaming industry with high detail, vast open world environments, you'll see how this technology sits into our visualization space. So what I'm really saying here is that visualization and the use of Twinmotion is at all stages of a visualization program, all stages of a conceptual understanding of a project, right through from basically a design sketch on the back of a beer mat type of through to the full implementation of the project.
No, great. So yeah, I think that's one sort of theme where we might touch upon is, you know, I think it's underutilized in the industry, visualizations earlier on, and through the design and detail and basic handover throughout the full life cycle of the project.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And to be honest, I'm discussing with colleagues and clients this all the time. Is not that it's a pretty picture then, for want of a better phrase, at the end of a project and displaying and saying this is what you're going to have. The idea of our visualization is, because we're talking about 3D and the spatial understanding of 3D, it fits right from the very start. Classically, if I was to say to you, design me something, Craig, my first question is going to be, what's it going to look like? So it's as simple as that. So we want to look at it right from that early stage, even the idea of the 3D version of the back of a beer mat, to be honest.
No, great. So a tool that is commonly used is Enscape and 3ds Max. How would you place these with Twinmotion compared to Twinmotion, perhaps?
Oh, excellent. There. Enscape. Enscape is also a great real-time render application. If I may, I would say that Enscape sits as an integral viewer of the Revit project. It is accessed within Revit and therefore is part of the BIM environment. Content from the Enscape library is essentially a Revit family with identity data, IFC parameters, etc. Schedules of Enscape content can be created like any Revit entity. So, but 3D Studio Max, we moved to 3D Studio Max. For me, it's described as a DCC, which is what I would say is a digital content creator. And of course, it has exceptional modeling, animation, and render capacity. I worked in training 3D Studio Max for many years for the video games industry. The discipline in that process lends perfectly to real-time 3D visuals in Twinmotion. So how would I place these with Twinmotion? Enscape is that viewer within Revit, producing excellent stills and a great immersive interaction with its VR capacity. 3D Studio Max is an independent modeler, texture, and renderer used for standalone stills and animation. Having support of many third-party renderers, I would use 3D Studio Max to create content for Twinmotion with a follow to Unreal Engine for a more advanced immersive features. So what we're saying, what I'm really saying is that 3D Studio Max is a content creator as well as a visualization concept, and also because it was used in the gaming industry a lot, 3D Studio Max was principally designed for that. Then the content that we can create in 3D Studio Max has all of the same discipline in its modeling, texturing, lighting capacity that a game engine would use. And of course, Twinmotion is being driven by the Unreal game engine by Epic Games. So if we adopt those disciplines, then we can use 3D Studio Max to create models. So like I say, Enscape is a renderer, but 3D Studio Max really is the full process.
So then Twinmotion, I guess that, as far as I can see, and you can just fill in the gaps really, is it does a lot of what Enscape does. It also does a lot what 3ds Max can do. And I think it's, and I think those are the capabilities we're going to discuss is, well, what is it, what processes or what sort of outputs can you expect, and maybe increase or your efficiency, rather than using a different software for different needs. You can maybe use this across your workflows. How would you use Twinmotion if you could implement it into a company like an architecture firm? How would you start that process?
Well, excellent. Yes, I mean Twinmotion is of course a great spatial analytical application. Visual indicators in design are very quickly created. So going back to actually what I was saying a moment ago, some of the design, if we have this spatial understanding at the earliest point of our design, then implementing it within an architectural practice is really what it's about. So classically in architecture, this can be implemented to include surface, texture, options, spatial perception, clash detection, build phasing, the phasing of the building, and more importantly, lighting in both interior and exterior, including day and night. In essence, it will portray and give guidance to the project in the same way we gather information in the real world around us. Twinmotion supports a 3D visual development of a project. This is an exceptional aspect of modern design in architecture. So in essence, what we're talking about there is that if I'm bringing that into an architectural practice, we're bringing in the understanding that we have around our natural world in the application. So we've got guidance through our own understanding of our own spatial awareness is being captured by Twinmotion through each of those stages of an architectural build.
I see, yeah, and so the way I see it as well is the quality of the images that are produced from Twinmotion, which we're going to show some examples coming up towards the end, and maybe some workflow stuff, or let's say some initial images that you might bring up. But is that you're able to work in tandem with your Revit model. In this case, Revit to Twinmotion linking. And as the model's being built, you can start building up your visualization live and maintain those changes. So within Twinmotion, you can start applying materials to your Revit elements. That link will be maintained as you carry on building your Revit model, and so forth. You can start looking at it and end up with very, very high-end visuals instantly, because it's not a stop-start workflow, which I think is going to really make this a game changer in a lot of ways.
Oh, absolutely. Very often clients are talking to me about where is Twinmotion sitting, essentially. And as we've just mentioned there, technically it will sit anywhere. I mean, it's a visual perception. But one of the main advantages I find with Twinmotion is that when a client is using Twinmotion, it is within Revit. Now, if you've got 2023 version of Revit, or more recently the 2024 version of Revit, then you actually have Twinmotion in the AEC collection. So there's a natural progression from your Revit model into Twinmotion. Now, there's two ways we can do this, and this is a lot, I've spoken to architects about this quite a few times, as to what do we do with Twinmotion? Where does it fit? And this is why Twinmotion has been developed as it is. It's not necessarily a plugin within Revit, and so therefore the Revit operative or the Revit user clicks on the object and then sees it in 3D. We can do that, but what we have with Revit, with Twinmotion really, is that we have what we call a datasmith connection, so that we can connect our model from Revit into Twinmotion. So that model can be exported anytime, and we can also create a synchronization with that, so that the visualizer could possibly be on a separate machine that is more dedicated to the graphic visualization, and the Revit user or the Revit operative or the Revit designer is staying on their system. So there's a synchronization going on all the time, which is really nice. And this is useful in a couple of ways, in that if I have a building, for example, in Revit, and if I make edits in Revit, for example, I move a wall or something like this, and then when that's synchronized to my Twinmotion, the wall itself that has been edited or changed and made a different size, for example, will inherit the Twinmotion edits that have happened in Twinmotion. So for example, if I change a wall or something like this, and yet in Twinmotion I've given it a different brick pattern, then it will automatically update. It's not going to just completely refresh the geometry. And this is really useful in that this means that this is a fluid movement forward. So two things: we're not reinventing geometry all the time, and also we're seeing an independent and yet synchronized workflow with our Revit model.
No, that's great. Geoff, do you have something, because I think a lot of this, we're going to show some of the high-end images on Twinmotion later, but maybe something early stages that you can kind of expect to use, and maybe a study, with Twinmotion, if you're just looking at it to kind of study your environment.
Yes, absolutely. Twinmotion has a lot of nice features in it, where, for example, I could create a massing study. For example, if I have a town build or something like this, I can use some of the features that are in Revit to place my building in the middle of London or whatever, and so I've got a 3D view of the world around me. for example, and particularly I was experimenting with this recently in London, or for a project in London. And so we've got our townhouse in London, and then next door to it we've got the mass-in that is downloaded as a location plan, which is 3D, and then I can adjust the height of the building if it's not quite right, and look at a shadow study in this regard. So very often from a spatial analysis, we've got some really first-class early features of where the project will look like. So even at early stages, literally just click and go, how does this fit in my environment? If I place this at this particular location, how will the shadows affect this? How will the traffic around my building, how is this going to impact it? This is very useful, I find, with Twinmotion, because at those early stages, we can sign off, so to speak. We can sign off concepts and think, well, I thought that would be working, but clearly that is not going to work at all. So we can get rid of a lot of pointers and concentrate on the focus of the design we have, because by having a 3D conceptual understanding at such an early stage, we can sign off or think about the environment straight away. Yeah.
Okay, great. And so what are some of the challenges you come up against when trying to implement Twinmotion?
Well, I'd say that one of the main implementation challenges, if I'm honest, of Twinmotion is having some tidy 3D modeling to start with. Now, Twinmotion is a real-time render application. And therefore is game engine technology. I mentioned earlier on about that, obviously that it's part of Unreal by Epic Games. So if I looked at the gaming industry and say, look, you know, when we're creating a geometry for a game engine, clearly, as you're probably aware, that if you're playing the game, it's instantly rendering. So we have to create a lot of geometry that is very highly optimized so that it will work. Now,
yeah.
Sorry?
No, sorry, carry on, Geoff.
Yeah, sorry. So, so for example, I'm saying that surfaces that are exactly in the same place, they cause a flicker as the renderer. The classic example of this is really what I was looking at a few days ago with a client. They're doing a nice walkthrough of their building, and suddenly it flickers on the floor. It's a nice Revit. Now, classically, what's happened is that they've got the walls of the lower floor are coming through, interpenetrating the floor, and the top of that wall and the surface of the story height are flickering together. So it's a simple case of going into my Revit and changing the model so that those surfaces are not interpenetrating. So, you know, the main challenge for me, to be honest, and this is really a lot of the work I do, is to try to say to clients, when you're modeling, we need to try and be a little bit more understanding that we are dealing with a real-time render. So if we add in a lot of geometry that's not necessary, and also if we're giving the renderer an issue, then it will slow things up and then clearly not be real time. So I think it's important for us to have some really good quality geometry. Now, having said that, people have said to me, yeah, but this is Revit. And I said, well, wait a minute. I think there's some really good tools in Revit to actually make sure that whilst you've got all your BIM metadata coming together, which is what Revit's about, you can still in tandem work with some really nice geometry. So that, like I said, some of the lower polygon modeling in Revit actually lends itself to the real-time render of such programs like Twinmotion. But but going back to the same question then, is that's the challenge, is to say to people, look, we need to be a bit more cautious of the geometry. and the size of bitmaps and things like this.
And muted there. I was muted there for a second, but Geoff, are you able to pull up on screen anything that you could show the Twinmotion environment, or just something that you've been working on?
Well, I can look at the Twinmotion site here. One of the things I've just been showing to folks earlier on is if I look at my screen, show my screen there. If you can see my screen here now, essentially this is the Revit, the twinmotion.com website. Now, I often point people directly to here because there's some really interesting answers made here, really. So, for example, real-time visualization is here. Now, even if I scroll down a little bit here, you can see nicely how we're sitting in architecture, automotive, even fashion and product design. Really, really useful stuff. If I move down further, one of the areas I quite like is that, as I mentioned earlier on, that easily synchronization, that easily sync in your design project. So if I got from my CAD program or Revit, I can very quickly come into Twinmotion. So even in here, you can see there's some really nice concepts coming into here straight away. So adding that organic flow into your geometry is so easy. So, for example, you can see a nice interior here that we've got some rather nice design. This exterior here with all the vegetation. One of the things I find with Twinmotion, if I'm absolutely honest, is that organic feel that we've been sorely missing for many years in architectural or product management. It's all very often it's been too angular and contrasty, whereas now you can see we can actually achieve some really nice concepts. That little bit there, by the way, with the lighting just showing there, if you're familiar with the terminology, there's what they call IES lights. Well, these lights are exceptionally good lighting, and there's not many other applications that will do that other than Unreal as well. So the concepts here are exceptionally good. And what's really good about this, and I don't mind saying it, is that it's quick. It really is quick, and that really turns the key for me, turns it round to say this is quick, so therefore I can bring in this concept earlier into my design process. If I bring this in earlier, I've had clients have said, well, what we tend to do is I formulate the full project, the trees, the lot, everything at as early stage as I can, and then we have a team meeting and we can say, oh yeah, I like that, but move that over there, move that wall over there, don't like that, I don't like that landscaping, I don't like this, don't like that. So essentially so much can be visualized, signed off, changed at amazing speed. So the speed of this is actually quite impressive. So as you can see, some really nice organic concepts in here as well. So yeah,
I think one of the things I appreciate from this is the next level you can take those to. Obviously, you know, like we spoke about Enscape, you got that sort of real-time rendering, but you end up with a certain level of output that is the same regardless. You can't really customize your outputs that much. So your company might have a certain visualization style, a certain signature, and so on, and you can start carrying that through with Twinmotion to that next level. You can really start it. Just look at this image. I mean, this is showing a certain weather conditions, a certain mood, a certain thing where you go like, wow, that's exciting. Whereas you might end up with a more flat image traditionally. So I really like it.
I mean, you mentioned the flat image. That's absolutely true, because if I look at a lot of the rendering that's been done as real-time rendering over the years, the imagery has always been slightly flat. If you've got some plugins that are put into Revit or Max or whatever that are just click and go situations, if I'm honest, it becomes a rather flat image. And we don't get a good depth of feeling. We don't get a depth in the image, and we don't get the mood. So when we look at something like Twinmotion and moving on towards Unreal, we actually are using render capacity that uses the light bouncing all over the place, secondary bouncing or indirect illumination as well, and also how glass, chrome, anything is impacting our environment. And all of those coefficients, as I would say, will actually impact our view. So psychologically or subconsciously, we can see that this is right. If we're not careful, like you say, everything becomes the same for everybody, and that is then we've lost it there. We completely lost it. So I think with Twinmotion, with that little bit of attention in Twinmotion, we've got all those lovely tools to create the mood that you're portraying, and this is why it works very well. That mood is we're portraying the mood, not just the geometry.
No, that's so true. So one of the things is we've got Twinmotion, which is kind of, you can get it directly from a website, but we also know that Twinmotion now comes free with your AEC collection. Could you sort of just give the difference between what that means? What's the difference between the Autodesk version and just direct from Unreal?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Now, recently, the partnership or the communication between Epic Games and Autodesk has been quite solid, and it's very interesting that there's a definite partnership going on there. I'm very pleased with that. Now, Twinmotion for Revit, it can be accessed from the products page on your Autodesk login. So if you've got an Autodesk login, of course, then you can just go to your projects page, scroll down until you see Twinmotion Access. So this will take you to the Revit Twinmotion download page on Epic Games. So you've got the Revit Twinmotion download from Epic Games. So you don't need to have an Epic Games account. However, if you do have an Epic Games account, you can access Twinmotion through the Epic Games launcher. The difference really is that as you're accessing Twinmotion from your Autodesk account and not Epic Games, the cloud-based tools are not available. So for example, there's some really nice cloud-based tools where you can upload your project or a presentation, animation or images to the cloud and give a link to your client and say, here is our project at this stage. Now, those are not available to you if you've accessed Twinmotion from your Autodesk account. It's because the cloud is run by Epic and you've just logged into Autodesk, so you wouldn't actually have access to that. But apart from that, all the features are the same. In essence, you've got all the full features. It did have an occasion where you couldn't render so high end, but you can do that now. So it's only through the Epic Games account. However, having said that, it's not a big problem to start an Epic Games account. It's free, so you could do that as well. So I personally use Epic. Obviously, I'm using it through my Epic Games launcher, so therefore I can upload to a cloud or my own account. So if you are thinking about this, there's absolutely no differences between the software or the applications, whether you get it from your Revit account or whether you're getting it from Epic. It's just the access to the cloud-based features there.
No, great. And yeah, I think how would one just start by getting getting it linked to Revit? I think you've got to go to your products page, if I'm not mistaken, from Autodesk, but it's
So when
fairly
you get,
yeah.
it's very straightforward. You'll go to your products page. I haven't got mine up here, but you could, if you go to the products page and you can scroll down, you'll see it says Twinmotion Access. Now, when you click on the word access, it's not actually, you are now actually being taken to Epic Games's portal there. So you're not actually in an Autodesk portal now. Obviously, if you were clicking on installing Max or Revit or something like that, clearly you're still within in your Revit portal, in your Autodesk portal. But if you click on Twinmotion Access, that's taking you over into the Epic Games. So this would actually take you over to the website I've been showing here so that you could download this. So if I was to move on to download onto my site here, you would download through that, install that. So you'd install that directly and it's very quick. It's about 53 gigabyte, I must say, because you're actually downloading quite a lot of content with it. So all those trees and stuff we saw a moment ago, that's being downloaded. So if you use Twinmotion, then come over to here, to this site, twinmotion.com, very simple here, where you've got Why Twinmotion on the top here as the first tab. You move all the way down here, we've got some plugins here. So we've got what we call a Datasmith plugin. Now, if you're working with Revit 2023 or 22, you would come here and look at our plugins. Now, if you're working with Revit, for example, clearly we would scroll down here and pick up our download here for our Datasmith exporter plugin for Revit. It's very simple. It's just a plugin to actually send you into that's it. I'll start up my Revit in a second here. Let's just do that just a second. So forgive me here.
No, that's okay, Geoff. I think
you know what I mean. So
yeah, no,
you get the plugins here. Now you download for Revit or download for whatever application you're using, and then you've got a tab on there. So then that's really all you need, is just that you've got Twinmotion there, and then it'll start Twinmotion up. Very straightforward.
no, that's great. Yeah, and just if you have installed it, I came across this initially, is when you're trying to find Twinmotion, once you've installed it in Revit, it's just under the View tab. But
so yeah, it's if you're working with Revit 2024,
yeah,
then it's now placed within the Revit interface on the View tab.
yes.
So
yes.
it's not another tab like an external plugin. And this is, once again, this is talking about the integration that Twinmotion or Epic are having with Autodesk, is that that Twinmotion is part of the Autodesk menu system, and it's not just an added tab that's there. I quite like that, to be honest. The reason why I like that is because when you're working with Revit and you have another plugin put on, and it'll shift the tabs along, and then the modifier tab disappears, and then when I'm in class, people say, where's the modifier tab? And then you've got to go and find it for them as well. So what I like about this is that now Twinmotion is part of the tab, especially in 2024. So strictly speaking, you don't even need to download the Datasmith, because it will already do that when you install 2024.
Great. How do we help clients, Geoff, and how can they get in touch?
Well, really speaking, there's many ways we can help our clients. I mean, I personally have done a lot recently where we can help our clients design and support for visualization workflow. We can advise on all aspects of visualization, including very comprehensive training programs. So in the first instance, I mean, please contact our fine marketing team. They're able to move your inquiry forward with perhaps a 30-minute design review discussion, or indeed looking at some of the training I do, and get in touch with us that way. The thing is that we're very, very keen to work with visualization. I am particularly, of course, as you would know, and anything we can do for our clients. So talk to the guys, for the fine folks here on the marketing team, and we can support you.
No, that's great. Yes, I think the key to this is we've got training available, we've got consulting. It's really just come speak to us. Marketing will be in touch, and we can sort of take a discussion forward. And you could even book a 30-minute session with someone from our team to discuss your needs. But that's great. Geoff, I have a question here from somebody. Would you use Max, 3ds Max in this case, I guess, for complex bespoke animations, such as moving cars and people, over and above standard animation functionality of Twinmotion, or prefer to take the whole production into Unreal Engine and finish off the animations and overall production there? I guess that's a bit complex on the moving the information.
Interesting question. Yeah, absolutely interesting question. Now, 3 Studio Max is a tool of choice for me for any animation, to be honest. So whether it be in-place animation, pose-to-pose animation. What I mean by pose-to-pose animation would be a car moving through the scene, but the animation of the wheels turning round is a different thing. So there's a lot coming in that question. But personally myself, what I would do, depending on the product, I would probably make as much of the content in essence in Max. I would make the content in 3D Studio Max, and even in 3D Studio Max, I would create some of the animation clips in Max, and then I would output the game exporter or the FBX exporter, so that I've captured the internal animation and then bring that into Unreal, not necessarily Twinmotion in this regard. There are a few things we can do from an animation point of view in Twinmotion. For example, a classic example, if you've got a door that when you move through your Twinmotion animation, classically you want the door to open. So in Twinmotion we have a concept called animators, or various animators. So for example, like rotation animator and slide animator. So if you've got doors sliding, doors opening, that type of thing, we can link an animator to some geometry. So we've got some principal animation going on there. So for example, I could have an animator for a curtain, a ceiling fan or something like that as you're walking through. But if I wanted my more comprehensive animation, I would certainly do it in 3D Studio Max. And then it would then go over into Unreal. So the Twinmotion file, which is actually another good question to come up with, is that I can export my entire Twinmotion project into Unreal, which is also rather good as well. We can do it 2 ways. We can import the Twinmotion project, or we can use the Datasmith Exchange as well within Twinmotion. However, even though it's the same company, so to speak, Unreal, under Epic Games, there's still some development going on there. And so some features of Twinmotion aren't working in Unreal, but basically, yeah, that's what I would do. So in essence, I would do the model in Max. The reason for that is because if I would want a comprehensive model, and this is going back to textures and lighting and things like that, I would want that to be as done as proficiently as I can, most optimized, and especially if it's going into Twinmotion, not Twinmotion, but Unreal. There's a concept called light baking and things like this, so that I would want to make sure that in Max I have that sorted out in my what they call UV mapping. So there's a few little things we would need to do to make it work, but essentially I would create the animation in Max.